I really want to know first off the bat.
Okay.
There's this kind of this idea that you grapple with, and I think it's obviously taken up heavily in the book, and it's talked about like all the time in the media, and especially around elections and stuff like that. It seems to rear its ugly head and just overtake and destroy any type of balanced and well-rounded discussion. But there's this idea: surplus good, deficit bad. Like, where does that come from? Can you explain what's that about? What is
Okay. Yeah, sure. And I think I might have touched on this a little bit last time, but really where it actually extends from is the Howard and Costello years. So when Peter Costello was actually the treasurer in Australia during the mining boom. So during that period, uh, because in a government budget, like again, this is what I was discussing before, that a budget kind of functions similar to what a profit and loss is, which is a very similar like financial report within a company. So you have an income, you have expenses. If your income's more, you have you have a profit, which to a government's budget is a surplus. But if you have a more expenses rather than your income, that's a loss, which to a budget, which is much more visible in the political landscape, you have a deficit. But because during the mining boom, the mining sector was just doing so well that really, at the end of the day, the government was just receiving more um, income than what it was actually spending on its programs. The budget, the government budget, was just continually in surplus from when Costello was in those years.
and Costello, is this and how, just for our non-Australian listeners, is this a conservative government? What?
Very much conservative government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Howard is. He's either I think he's the second longest running prime minister, a conservative prime minister. I think Menzies is first, but like Howard was in there for a very long time. And
So
yeah,
this
so
period that they're reigning, you're talking about basically the nation riding on the back of the mining boom, and their expenses are always being balanced and overtaken by whatever their income is from this mining boom. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, like there was a very common rhetoric around that time, and really, it's conservative rhetoric here in Australia that continues to this day. That you'll have a conservative treasurer or shadow treasurer say like, oh, we'll make sure to bring the budget back in black, because really, when there's a deficit, it's in red, and if it's in black, it means, oh, you've made a budget surplus, or at the very least, you've balanced. So, yeah, because um, Costello during those years was basically given an easy ride, and he very easily could have his income much more than his expenses in his budget. He basically created this mythos that it's really important that a government have a budget surplus rather than a budget deficit. And of course, at least in Australia, especially after Keating, I guess, privatizing the Commonwealth Bank of Australia and also Qantas. This is also the period that neoliberalism is kind of picking up here in Australia. So this is where the small government aspect of conservative governments like starts to ram home, where neoliberalism is taking a hold in Australia. So that's the reason why budget surpluses also again become prominence, because it can be like, oh, as a government, well, we don't really have to do much. We should leave it to the market. So that's where surpluses become very convenient for conservatives.
Right, very interesting. So, so then, still, the idea then of a government having a deficit, what I'm hearing is not too much of a problem.
Well, yes, because really, it's interesting that you have this dichotomy of surplus good, deficit bad, because this mythos was established during the Costello years, but then straight after the Howard years, you have Kevin Rudd, and you have the GFC, and the global financial crisis pretty much everywhere else. Um, People hit recessions. Obviously, America was massively bad. But the thing is, Rudd, which to this day, everyone says that his stimulus package was, you know, the best in the world at the time. He was actually hammered in the papers, and he was hammered at the time of, oh, but Mr. Rudd, your budget's in deficit. You've overspent your budget. But later down the track, it's actually shown that him stimulating the economy, putting that $900 check in every single person's hand in order to stimulate the economy, it was the reason why Australia had minimal effects from the global financial crisis.
Right.
It was him not only producing a budget deficit, as in him stimulating the economy and pumping money into the economy so we could produce further things. Like, this is what Richard Deniser talks about. Him doing that was the reason why we were able to at least divert away from those sort of severe effects compared to other Western countries like the USA.